Acquaintance rape on a fishing vessel. This picture is an Oregon port, had nothing to do with my rape. I studied zoology in college, the practical application of which was to become a wildlife and fisheries biologist. This is when I was 20. I was an intern in Nevada with the Bureau of Land Management, and these are two red-tailed hawks that I helped ban, and I was in seventh heaven. I loved that job. Most of my paid employment, however, was as a fisheries observer on Soviet, Japanese, and Polish fishing vessels. Most of the foreign vessels worked in joint ventures with American catcher boats. This is an American catcher boat. They caught the fish and delivered the caught ends of fish to the foreign fishing vessels. This is a Polish vessel taking a caught end or net of freshly caught fish. This is a fishing vessel pulling a net onto the deck. This is a Soviet fishing vessel, and they're dumping a net of fish. If you're wondering what Soviet means, it's what Russia was called before it became a capitalist country. When it was communist, it was called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The caught ends of fish were dumped into bins either on deck or below deck. This is a Soviet fishing vessel in March or February on the Bering Sea. So there was ice. It was very, very cold. I also worked off the coast of Oregon and Washington. This page from my photo album was taken on a Japanese surimi trawler. I was working on deck. It was February. It was cold. I wore a deck suit plus rain gear. In the other photo is the bulkhead of the ship with a bunch of gulls, and then I'm also sitting in the officer's mess with one of the mates during dinner. I included this page from my photo album to show what we fisheries biologists did. Although this is not the regular work that I did, this was a crab study that I participated on the mothership, the Sulak. We identified the species of fish caught, determined their sex, and weighed them, and counted them. I included photos to show you what life at sea was like. This is my Japanese vessel. This is the chief mate and the trawl master. This black and white photo was taken and developed on board the Soviet fishing vessel by one of the Soviet fishermen. That's how we dressed during summer on the Bering Sea. This fellow is the ship's doctor on one of the Soviet fishing vessels. This is a Soviet fishing vessel making a port call in Dutch Harbor. And this photo is the crime scene. It was taken the day I was raped. This is merely a placeholder picture while I tell my story. This was taken when I was 9. I was depressed, chronically depressed, because of all the childhood trauma I went through. I'm probably going to stop and start this video as I record it, just so I can get my story right and process my feelings. The day I was raped, my fishing vessel tied up to a cargo ship, and on the other side was another fishing vessel. We were offloading frozen fish product. Both of us, both our ships were offloading fish product onto the Soviet cargo vessel. And the joint venture representative on my boat was married to the previous observer who was waiting for a ride home. They were a married couple. And we all went over to the other fishing vessel on the other side of the cargo vessel. And the photo that you saw of me in the last photo of me was making a transfer between vessels. And what happened is it was just a social visit. And the Russians do what the Russians do or did before Putin kind of changed the culture a bit. They drank vodka. And because I was an adult child of an alcoholic, I didn't drink very much. I was a lightweight. I drank a little bit socially, sometimes maybe once a month with friends. Maybe 6 months would go by before I had another alcoholic drink. And I wasn't used to vodka. I drank Kahlua and cream and coffee or something like that. And what they did on the fishing vessel, they drank vodka. Well, I would just take a tiny sip of vodka, but maybe a tiny sip of vodka is like a 10 of them is like maybe a shot glass full of vodka. And when you're not used to drinking very much the way I was, I got drunk. And when I got drunk, I didn't really have a good idea of what was going on, and I didn't have the ability to assert my will. And what happened is the Soviet ship captains entertained us with food and vodka, and then they had to go back to work. So what we did is we went to the other joint venture representatives' cabin on the other fishing vessel and hung out and drank more vodka. And what happened is eventually the other observer and the other joint venture representative, who was his wife, went back to the vessel that we had been working on, living on and working on, and they left me alone. And by that time I was so drunk I really don't remember what happened. And what I do remember happening is being awakened by furious knocking on the door. And I was naked in a bunk with this joint venture representative penetrating me. That's the nice way of putting it. I was just utterly embarrassed. When I got dressed hurriedly, the ships were parting, my vessel was untying. They wanted me back on board because I was officially the observer, and they needed me to work. And so when I got dressed and went out of the cabin, all the ships, all the crews were all lined up watching this drunk female fisheries observer transferring from ship to ship. And they put, not in the photo, it wasn't in the photo, but they could put a rope belt on me and make sure that I was safe when I was transferring. I don't remember exactly what happened, but it was one of the most humiliating things that ever happened to me. And it took me a long time. I blamed myself for getting drunk, that what happened was my fault because I was stupid and got drunk. So I never drank again beyond sips of wine, communion wine. And it was actually the second date rape. The other date rape is too horrible for me to talk about. The circumstances are too embarrassing and too painful. This is bad enough, but I don't feel as much responsibility for this one. And what it did to my sexuality between child sex abuse and 2 date rapes knocked me out. It was really hard on my marriage because I never liked or wanted sex. And it's one of the reasons why I don't date or didn't date after I got divorced. Or I dated a little bit, but not very much. And it's just, date rape is devastating. It's as devastating as stranger rape, maybe even more devastating than stranger rape, because with stranger rape, you're not responsible. With date rape, you go, gee, that was stupid. I really shouldn't have done that. And the damage is lasting. I want to remind people that it's not men that I don't like. My best friends in my life have been my father and my son.